Commander Vexstar walked through the halls of the Galactic Defense Academy with the steady pace of someone who had done this same route 1,000 times before. His dark green skin caught the artificial light from the ceiling panels, and his forearms moved in perfect rhythm as he carried data tablets and training equipment. Students from dozens of different worlds stepped aside as he passed, showing the respect that came with his reputation as one of the Academy's toughest instructors. The Academy sat on Station Harmony, a massive space station that orbited the neutral world of Kepler Prime. It was the most important military school in known space, where the best warriors from every species came to learn advanced combat techniques, strategy, and leadership. Vexstar had been teaching here for 23 years, and he thought he had seen everything the galaxy had to offer. He stopped at his office door and pressed his palm against the scanner. The metal door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a small room filled with holographic displays showing student progress reports, combat scores, and psychological evaluations. Vexstar set down his equipment and activated his main computer terminal, preparing to review the day's training results. Zelani students had performed well in speed trials, as expected. Their long legs and lightweight frames made them natural scouts and reconnaissance specialists. The results showed average times that would have broken records on most other worlds. Vexstar nodded with approval and moved to the next report. Torgan cadets had dominated the heavy weapons training, which surprised no one. Their thick, rock-like skin could absorb impacts that would kill most other species, and their massive arms could carry weapons that required mechanical assistance. For everyone else, their instructor had noted that 3 of them had actually improved the standard firing positions by adapting them to their unique physiology. The Mindari telepaths had excelled in the strategic planning exercises, using their mental abilities to coordinate complex battle scenarios with an efficiency that amazed their instructors. Vexstar had worked with Mindari officers before and knew their value in real combat situations where split-second communication could mean the difference between victory and disaster. But as he scrolled through the reports, one name kept appearing. That made him frown. Maya Collins, listed as Human Species Classification Terran. Next to her name were rows of zeros. 0 combat scores, 0 psychological evaluations, 0 attendance records, 0 participation in any Academy activity for the past 8 months. Vexstar pulled up her complete file, hoping to find some explanation for the missing data. The record was surprisingly thin for an Academy student. Her home address was listed as Earth, a planet in what the star charts called the Sol System. Her tuition showed as paid in full for 3 years, transferred from something called the Human Colonial Development Fund. There were no recommendations from military officers, no previous combat experience, and no species-specific training notes. Most puzzling of all, there was no emergency contact information beyond a name and address. Daniel Collins, listed as father, residing at the same Earth address as the student. Vexstar leaned back in his chair, all 4 of his arms crossing as he considered this mystery. In his 23 years at the Academy, he had never encountered a student who simply never showed up. The selection process was incredibly difficult. Most species sent only their absolute best candidates, young warriors who had already proven themselves in local conflicts or training programs. The waiting list to attend the Academy stretched for years, with thousands of qualified applicants competing for a few hundred spots each term. Yet, here was a human who had somehow earned a place at the Academy and then completely ignored it. The computer showed that her dormitory room had been assigned and prepared, her meal plan was active, and her access codes had been generated. Everything was ready for her arrival, but Maya Collins had never used any of it. Vexstar tried to remember what he knew about humans. They were a newly discovered species, barely capable of interstellar travel. The first contact reports described them as physically weak compared to most galactic species, with short lifespans and emotional instability. Their homeworld was listed as a Class M planet with standard gravity and atmosphere, nothing that would produce particularly hardy or skilled warriors. The initial diplomatic contacts had been routine. The humans seemed eager to join galactic society and had quickly established trade agreements and cultural exchange programs. A few human scientists and diplomats had visited other worlds, and they appeared to be a peaceful, curious species more interested in learning than fighting out. So why had someone thought one of them belonged at the Galactic Defense Academy? Vex Star activated his communication system and sent a message to Academy Director Zelnoth, requesting a meeting about the missing student. The response came back within minutes, asking him to report to the director's office immediately. Director Zelnoth was a tall, thin creature from the Altarian system, with pale blue skin and large black eyes that seemed to see everything. His office was twice the size of Vexstar, with floor-to-ceiling windows that showed the stars beyond the station. The director looked up from his desk as Vexstar entered, his expression showing the same confusion that Vexstar felt. "Commander, I assume you're here about the Collins situation," Zelnoth said, gesturing for Vexstar to take a seat. "I've been getting questions about her from the administrative staff for months." "Yes, sir. I've never seen anything like this. A student who never attends a single class, never takes a single exam, never even sets foot on the station. How did she even get accepted?" Zelnoth pulled up a holographic display showing Maya Collins's application. The recommendation came through unusual channels. Apparently, some of our intelligence operatives encountered human strategic thinking during a border dispute with the Sectari pirates. The humans provided tactical advice. It was so effective that our people recommended immediate academy placement for whoever was responsible. And that was Maya Collins? According to the reports, yes. But the details are classified above our level. All I know is that someone in galactic intelligence believes this human has military potential worth developing. Vexstar studied the sparse file information again. "Sir, with respect, this could be a mistake. The humans are a primitive species. Their technology is centuries behind ours. Their physical capabilities are limited, and they have no experience with modern warfare. Perhaps our intelligence people misunderstood something." "Perhaps," Zelnoth agreed. "But we can't simply ignore a student who's taking up a valuable academy position. The waiting list is too long, and too many qualified candidates are being turned away. We need to resolve this situation." "What do you suggest, sir?" The director was quiet for a moment, looking out at the stars. "I want you to go to Earth, Commander. Find Maya Collins. Determine whether she's a legitimate academy candidate or if this is some kind of administrative error. If she's genuinely qualified, bring her back for proper evaluation. If not, we'll remove her from the roster and offer her position to someone who will actually use it." Vexstar nodded. It made sense, even though the idea of traveling to a primitive world to retrieve one missing student seemed like using a battlecruiser to deliver mail. "When do you want me to leave, sir?" "As soon as possible. Take the fast courier ship Meridian. The trip to Earth should take about 2 weeks. I want this resolved before the next term begins." As Vexstar left the director's office, he found himself wondering what he would find on Earth. Would Maya Collins turn out to be a mistake in the records? A primitive who had no idea she'd been accepted to the galaxy's most elite military academy? Or was there something about humans that the initial contact reports had missed? Something that would explain why galactic intelligence considered one of them worth a place at the academy. He had a feeling that this simple mission was going to be more complicated than anyone expected. The Meridian dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, and Vexstar got his first real look at the human homeworld. Earth hung in the darkness like a blue and white marble, exactly as the survey reports had described it. Nothing about it looked threatening or unusual. It was just another Class M planet with standard atmospheric composition and normal gravity. Vextar had seen dozens of worlds exactly like it. The approach to Earth took 6 hours, giving Vextar time to review everything the galactic databases contained about humans. The information was limited but consistent. Humans were a young species, having only developed spaceflight within the last century. Their technology was primitive by galactic standards. Their society was fractured into competing nation-states, and their average lifespan was barely a tenth of most spacefaring species. They had only made contact with Galactic Civilization 15 years ago, when one of their primitive exploration vessels had been discovered drifting in space with engine problems. The rescue ship had found the humans friendly, but clearly overwhelmed by the scope of galactic society. Since then, they had established embassies on a few worlds and sent small numbers of diplomats and scientists to learn about the galaxy. Nothing in the reports suggested that humans possessed any special military capabilities. Their weapons were crude projectile and chemical-based systems that would be useless against modern energy shields. Their soldiers were trained for conflicts against other humans, not for the complex multi-species warfare that dominated galactic politics. They had no experience with space combat, no understanding of energy weapons, and no knowledge of alien psychology or tactics. So why had someone recommended one of them for the Academy? Vextar landed his shuttle at a human facility called Denver International Airport, following the coordinates that Maya Collins's file had listed as the nearest transportation hub to her address. The landing process was surprisingly smooth, with human air traffic controllers guiding him to a special area designated for non-human visitors. The first thing that struck him about Earth was how normal everything felt. The gravity was comfortable. The air was clean and breathable, and the temperature was within acceptable ranges for most galactic species. It was exactly the kind of world that should produce peaceful farmers and merchants, not warriors. A human official met him at the landing area, a middle-aged woman in a simple blue uniform who introduced herself as Lisa Carter from the State Department. She was polite and efficient, helping him through the entry procedures with minimal fuss. Like most humans Vextar had encountered, she seemed slightly nervous around his alien appearance, but did her best to hide it. "Welcome to Earth, Commander Vextar," she said, checking his diplomatic credentials on a primitive electronic device. "I understand you're here on educational business? Something about a student?" "Yes, I need to locate a human named Maya Collins. She's enrolled at an off-world academy, but has never attended classes. I'm here to determine if there's been some kind of mistake." Lisa nodded and consulted her device again. "Maya Collins, let me see. Yes, we have her listed in our database. She lives in a small town called Cedar Falls, about 200 kilometers north of here. It's a quiet college town, nothing special. Are you sure you have the right person?" "That's what I'm here to find out." The journey to Cedar Falls took Vextar through countryside that looked remarkably peaceful. Rolling hills covered with crops, small farms with animals grazing in fields, and scattered houses that spoke of a civilization focused on agriculture and simple living. Nothing he saw suggested a world that produced military strategists capable of impressing galactic intelligence. Cedar Falls itself was exactly what Lisa Carter had described. A small town built around a modest college, with tree-lined streets and buildings that looked like they had been standing for decades without major conflict or damage. Students walked between classes carrying books and electronic devices, looking exactly like young people on any peaceful world throughout the galaxy. Vextar found the address listed in Maya Collins's file without difficulty. It was a small bookstore on the main street of the town, with large windows displaying old books and comfortable reading chairs. A hand-painted sign above the door read, Collins Books and Rare Manuscripts. Through the window, he could see shelves packed with physical books, something that was becoming rare on most advanced worlds. He pushed open the door, causing a small bell to ring. The interior of the store was warm and smelled of old paper and coffee. Books covered every surface, organized in sections that seemed to focus on history and archaeology. Behind the main counter, a man in his 50s looked up from a thick volume. He had been reading. "Good afternoon," the man said, setting down his book and standing up. "Welcome to Collins Books. I'm Danny Collins. How can I help you?" Vextar studied the human carefully. Danny Collins was of average height and build for his species, with graying hair and friendly eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He showed no signs of military training, no weapons, and no indication that he was anything other than exactly what he appeared to be, a small-town bookstore owner. "I'm looking for Maya Collins," Vextar said. "I understand she lives here?" "Maya? Yes, she's my daughter. She's upstairs in our apartment, working on her thesis." "Is this about her studies? Are you from the university?" "Not exactly. I'm from the Galactic Defense Academy. Maya is enrolled as a student, but she's never attended classes. I'm here to investigate." Danny Collins blinked in surprise, then smiled. "Oh, that. Yes, Maya mentioned something about receiving some kind of acceptance letter from an off-world school. She's been meaning to look into it, but she's been so busy with her archaeology degree. Would you like me to call her down?" Before Vextar could answer, footsteps sounded on a staircase at the back of the store. A young woman appeared, carrying a stack of books and what looked like a laptop computer. She was in her early 20s, with brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and wearing casual clothes that any college student might choose. "Dad, did you say something about the academy?" she asked, setting her books on the counter. Then she noticed Vextar and smiled politely. "Oh, hello. You must be from off-world. Are you here about that school thing?" Vextar stared at her. Maya Collins looked exactly like what she was supposed to be, a young human woman studying at a local college. She was small by galactic standards, probably weighing less than most academy cadets carrying equipment. Her hands showed no calluses. From weapons training, her posture showed no signs of military bearing, and her expression held nothing but curious friendliness. "You are Maya Collins?" he asked. "Yes, that's me. And you are?" "Commander Vextar, from the Galactic Defense Academy. You've been enrolled as a student for 8 months, but you've never attended a single class." Maya looked genuinely surprised. 8 months? Really? I thought it was just a few weeks ago that I got that letter. Time flies when you're working on a thesis. She gestured to the books she had been carrying. "I'm studying pre-contact warfare. Patterns in North American indigenous societies. Fascinating stuff, really." Vextar felt a growing sense of confusion. This could not be the person that Galactic Intelligence had recommended for academy training. Maya Collins was exactly what the survey reports had suggested humans would be: peaceful, academically minded, and completely unprepared for military life. "Miss Collins," he said carefully, "the Galactic Defense Academy is the most prestigious military institution in known space. We train the elite warriors from dozens of species. Are you telling me you received an acceptance letter and simply forgot about it?" Maya shrugged. "Not forgot, exactly. More like I'd been busy with other things. I mean, it sounds interesting and all, but I'm in the middle of my senior year here. Professor Martinez is expecting my thesis defense next month, and I've got 3 part-time jobs to pay for school. An off-world military academy seems like something I could look into later, maybe during summer break." Danny Collins poured a cup of coffee from a machine behind the counter and offered it to Vextar. Maya's always been focused on her studies, Commander. She's been fascinated by military history since she was a child, always reading about ancient battles and siege tactics. I think that's why she chose archaeology as her major. Military history? Vextar asked, accepting the coffee and noting that his hands were steady despite his growing bewilderment. Oh yes, Maya said, brightening. My thesis is actually about how different cultures adapted their warfare techniques when facing technologically superior opponents. It's amazing how often the underdog wins through creative thinking and unconventional tactics. She paused and looked at Vextar with sudden interest. Actually, since you're here from a galactic military academy, maybe you could help me with something. I've been trying to understand how modern space warfare works compared to historical patterns. Do you have time to answer a few questions? Vextar found himself staying in Cedar Falls much longer than he had planned. What was supposed to be a simple investigation had turned into something he could not quite understand. Maya Collins continued to treat his presence like an interesting distraction from her studies, offering to show him around town while she thought about attending the academy that others would kill for a chance to enter. On his third day on Earth, Maya took him to the local history museum. The building was small and unremarkable from the outside, but inside, Vextar discovered something that made his warrior instincts twitch with unease. The museum was filled with displays about human warfare throughout history, and Maya moved through the exhibits like a professor giving a lecture. This is from the Civil War period, she said, pointing to a display case containing primitive firearms and uniforms. What's interesting is how quickly both sides adapted to new technologies. They started with tactics from earlier wars, but within months they had developed entirely new approaches to combat. Vextar studied the weapons in the case. They were crude by galactic standards, simple chemical-powered projectile systems that would barely scratch modern armor. But there were so many different types, each representing a different solution to a specific battlefield problem. Your people fought many wars? He asked. Maya laughed. Oh, constantly. Dad always jokes that human history is just one long war with brief pauses for paperwork. We've been fighting each other since before we discovered agriculture. Swords, spears, arrows, gunpowder, aircraft, nuclear weapons. We get very creative when it comes to finding new ways to solve problems through violence. She said it so casually that it took Vextar a moment to process what she had actually said. Nuclear weapons. Most galactic species considered nuclear technology too dangerous to weaponize, using it only for power generation under strict safety protocols. Yet Maya spoke about nuclear warfare like it was just another tool in a long list of human innovations. You said nuclear weapons like they were common, Vextar said carefully. Well, not common exactly, but we've had them for almost a century now. We actually used them in warfare twice, and spent the next 70 years building enough of them to destroy our planet several times over. It was called the Cold War. Very tense period. Both sides pointing thousands of nuclear missiles at each other, just waiting to see who would blink first. Maya moved to the next display, which showed weapons from something called World War II. This period is fascinating from a strategic perspective. You had multiple powers fighting on several continents simultaneously, with constantly evolving technology and tactics. The rate of innovation was incredible. At the start of the war, most fighting was done with bolt-action rifles and biplanes. By the end, they had jet aircraft, guided missiles, and electronic warfare. Vextar stared at the timeline displayed on the wall. According to the dates, World War II had lasted only 6 years. In that time, humans had gone from primitive aircraft to jet engines, from simple radios to electronic warfare systems, from basic explosives to nuclear weapons. The rate of military innovation was unlike anything he had seen in his study of galactic warfare. How many people died in this war? He asked. Estimates vary, but somewhere between 50 and 80 million, Maya replied, reading from the information. Plaque. Though if you include the follow-up conflicts and the Cold War proxy wars, the numbers get much higher. 80 million deaths in 6 years. Vexstar had fought in several galactic conflicts, but even the largest battles rarely involved casualty figures in the millions. The idea of a single war killing 80 million people on one planet was almost beyond his comprehension. They moved through more exhibits, and the pattern continued. Humans had fought wars continuously throughout their history, each conflict, driving rapid innovation in weapons, tactics, and strategy. Maya discussed siege warfare like other people might talk about sports, analyzing the tactical decisions of ancient generals with an enthusiasm that made Vexstar increasingly uncomfortable. The Mongol invasions are particularly interesting, she said, stopping at a display about a historical period called the Middle Ages. They conquered the largest land empire in history using psychological warfare, superior logistics, and adaptive tactics. When they encountered new defensive technologies, they would capture enemy engineers and force them to improve Mongol siege weapons. You seem to know a great deal about military strategy, Vexstar observed. Maya shrugged. It's my field of study. Professor Martinez always says that archaeology is just military history with better funding. Most of what we dig up is either weapons or the ruins of places that were destroyed by weapons. That afternoon, Maya took him to meet Professor Martinez at the college. Dr. Linda Martinez turned out to be a woman in her 40s who taught in the anthropology department, specializing in what she called conflict archaeology. Her office was filled with artifacts from various human wars, maps showing ancient battle sites, and thick books with titles like The Evolution of Siege Warfare and Logistics and the Art of War. Maya is one of my best students, Professor, Martinez explained as they sat in her cluttered office. She has an intuitive understanding of how military pressures drive cultural change. Her thesis on adaptive warfare strategies is graduate-level work. What exactly is her thesis about? Vexstar asked. She's analyzing how smaller, technologically inferior forces can defeat larger, more advanced enemies through unconventional tactics and superior strategy. It's based on historical case studies, but the principles she's identifying have applications far beyond archaeology. Maya pulled out her laptop and opened a file. Want to see something interesting? I've been working on this theoretical scenario for my thesis. Imagine a small, technologically backward civilization that suddenly finds itself facing invasion by a vastly superior spacefaring empire. She turned the screen toward Vexstar, showing a complex diagram filled with tactical symbols and strategic notations. The conventional response would be to surrender immediately, right? The technology gap is too large to overcome through direct confrontation. Vexstar nodded. It was basic military logic. When facing an enemy with overwhelming technological superiority, surrender was often the only rational choice. But what if the inferior force focused on asymmetric warfare? Maya continued, highlighting different sections of her diagram. Hit-and-run attacks on supply lines, psychological warfare to demoralize enemy forces, turning the invader's technology against them through sabotage and misdirection. She clicked to the next screen, showing a timeline of how such a conflict might develop. The key is to avoid playing by the enemy's rules. Don't fight the battles they want to fight. Instead, make them fight on your terms, using your advantages against their weaknesses. Vexstar studied the tactical analysis and felt a chill run down his spine. Maya's theoretical scenario was remarkably similar to several real conflicts that galactic intelligence had been tracking. Her suggested strategies were not just clever, they were devastatingly effective. This is just theoretical work? He asked. Of course, Maya said. though Professor Martinez has been sharing some of my papers with colleagues at other universities. Apparently, there's quite a bit of interest in my work from military historians. Professor Martinez smiled. Maya's insights have attracted attention from some unexpected places. I've had inquiries about her research from think tanks, policy institutes, even some government agencies. It seems that theoretical warfare studies have more practical applications than we initially thought. As they walked back toward the bookstore, Vextar found himself looking at Maya Collins with new eyes. She still appeared to be exactly what she claimed, a college student working on her archaeology degree. But her casual expertise in military strategy, her encyclopedic knowledge of warfare throughout human history, and her ability to analyze complex tactical scenarios suggested something far more sophisticated than a simple academic exercise. When they reached the bookstore, Maya turned to him with a thoughtful expression. "Commander, can I ask you something? This academy of yours, what kind of scenarios do they use for training exercises?" "Various combat situations, space battles, planetary invasions, resource conflicts." "Why do you ask?" Maya smiled. "Just curious. I've been thinking about what you said, and I might actually be interested in visiting your academy. It could provide some interesting research opportunities for my graduate work." Vextar stared at her. After 3 days on Earth, he was beginning to suspect that Maya Collins might not be the primitive student he had expected to find. But he still had no idea just how dangerous she actually was. Vextar was preparing to leave Earth with more questions than answers when everything changed. On his 7th day in Cedar Falls, he received an urgent message from Academy Director Zalmoth. A Kethari battle fleet had been dispatched to retrieve both him and the problematic human student. The message was clear: bring Maya Collins back immediately, or face formal charges for failing to complete his mission. He found Maya at the library, sitting at a corner table surrounded by history books and her laptop computer. She looked up when he approached, smiling as if she had been expecting him. "Commander, you look worried. Is everything okay?" "Miss Collins, I need to speak with you urgently. There's been a development in your situation." Maya saved her work and closed the laptop. "Let me guess. Your superiors are getting impatient about me not showing up for school?" "It's more serious than that. A battle fleet is en route to Earth. My director wants you brought to the academy immediately, with or without your consent." Instead of looking frightened, Maya tilted her head with interest. "A battle fleet? How many ships?" 12 vessels, including heavy cruisers and support craft. "Miss Collins, this is not a situation you can treat lightly. These are serious military forces with orders to retrieve you." Maya was quiet for a moment, staring out the library window at the peaceful street beyond. "Commander, can I ask you something? In your experience, what happens when a technologically superior force tries to impose its will on a supposedly primitive planet? The primitive planet usually surrenders or gets conquered." "Why? Just curious." Maya stood up and gathered her books. "I suppose I should pack a bag. No point in making this harder than it needs to be." Vextar was surprised by her calm reaction. "You're willing to come voluntarily?" "Of course. I've been meaning to visit your academy anyway. This just provides the motivation I needed." She paused and looked at him directly. "Besides, I'm curious to see how this plays out." Something in her tone made Vextar uneasy, but he could not pinpoint exactly what bothered him. Maya Collins continued to act like a student agreeing to transfer schools, not someone facing forced removal from her homeworld by alien military forces. 2 days later, the Kethari fleet arrived in Earth's outer system. Vextar watched the tactical displays from the human government's Emergency Coordination Center, where he had been invited to observe the diplomatic negotiations. Maya sat beside him, still carrying only a small travel bag, watching the proceedings. With the same interested expression, she might use for a particularly engaging lecture. The human response surprised everyone. Instead of the panic or immediate surrender that most primitive species displayed when confronted by galactic military power, Earth's leaders politely but firmly requested that proper diplomatic procedures be followed. They would not hand over one of their citizens without appropriate legal processes, regardless of the circumstances. Admiral Rex Morgan of the Human Space Force, a calm man in his 60s, spoke directly to the Cathari fleet commander via communication link. "We appreciate your position, Admiral Croft, but Ms. Collins is a human citizen under the protection of Earth's government. If your academy wishes to discuss her enrollment, we're happy to arrange proper diplomatic meetings. This is not a negotiation," Admiral Croft replied, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to instant obedience. "The human will be transferred to our custody immediately. Any resistance will be considered an act of war." Admiral Morgan's response was delivered in the same calm tone. "I'm sorry you feel that way, Admiral, but our position remains unchanged." Vextar expected the conversation to end there, followed by either human surrender or a brief, one-sided battle. Instead, Maya Collins asked to speak directly to the Cathari commander. "Admiral Croft," she said, her voice carrying easily across the communication link, "I understand you're here to collect me for academy enrollment. I appreciate the personal attention, but I'm afraid I have a few questions about your curriculum. First, human, you will comply with our instructions immediately." "Of course, but first, I'm curious about your fleet's current tactical position." "You're maintaining standard formation at the edge of our system, with your heavy ships positioned to block the main hyperspace routes. Very traditional, very predictable." Admiral Croft's response showed growing irritation. "Our formation is of no concern to you." Maya opened her laptop and began typing. "Actually, it's quite interesting from an academic perspective. You see, I've been studying the historical patterns of how technologically superior forces approach conquest scenarios. Your deployment follows classic galactic doctrine almost exactly." As she spoke, Vextar noticed that the humans around them were working at their computers with increasing intensity. Admiral Morgan was receiving constant updates from his staff, but his expression remained calm. "The problem with classic doctrine," Maya continued, "is that it assumes your opponents will fight the kind of war you're prepared for. But what if they don't?" Alarms began sounding on the Cathari ships. Admiral Croft's voice, when it came back over the communication link, carried a note of confusion. "What have you done?" "Nothing dramatic," Maya replied. "Just a little demonstration of asymmetric warfare principles. You see, while you were positioning your ships to control our hyperspace routes, we were using our primitive computer networks to map your fleet's electronic systems." On the tactical display, Vextar watched in disbelief as the Cathari ships began to drift out of formation. Their engine signatures were fluctuating, their communication arrays were going offline, and their weapon systems showed massive power failures. "Your ships are broadcasting on open frequencies," Maya explained, her fingers still moving across her keyboard. "We've been listening to your internal communications, mapping your computer networks, and identifying your vulnerabilities. It turns out that advanced technology can be a weakness when it's too complex for proper security." Admiral Croft's voice now carried obvious panic. "This is impossible. Your technology is centuries behind ours." "True," Maya agreed. "But you made the mistake of thinking that technological inferiority means strategic inferiority. Our computers might be primitive, but we understand something that you apparently don't, which is how to turn an enemy's strengths against them." The Cathari fleet was now completely dead in space. Every ship had lost power, communications, and weapons. They hung in the darkness like expensive metal sculptures. Completely helpless, Admiral Morgan spoke into the communication link, his voice still calm and professional. Admiral Kraft, as I mentioned earlier, we're happy to discuss Miss Collins's enrollment through proper diplomatic channels. In the meantime, we'll be sending rescue ships to assist your fleet with their apparent technical difficulties. Vexstar stared at Maya Collins, who was closing her laptop with the satisfied expression of someone who had just solved a particularly challenging puzzle. "How did you do that?" "Simple computer science," she replied. "Every system has vulnerabilities, and overconfident enemies make the best targets. Your fleet spent 2 days broadcasting detailed information about their internal systems while positioning for what they thought would be an easy conquest. We just listened, learned, and acted." "But you're a college student studying archaeology." Maya smiled. "Commander, I tried to explain this to you earlier. On Earth, studying warfare isn't separate from other education. It's part of everything. We learn history, archaeology, computer science, even literature and art. My entire civilization has been perfecting the art of war for thousands of years." Director Zalmeeth's voice came over Vexstar's personal communicator, sounding shaken. "Commander, report to the Academy immediately. Bring Collins with you, but as an instructor, not a student. And tell her that her first assignment will be redesigning our entire strategic curriculum." Maya picked up her travel bag and stood. "Well, Commander, I suppose it's time for that Academy visit after all. I have some ideas about updating your tactical training that I think your students will find very educational." As they walked toward Vexstar's shuttle, Maya looked back at the disabled Kethare fleet hanging helplessly in Earth's outer system. "You know, this would make an excellent case study for my next paper. I think I'll call it Why Underestimating Your Enemy is the Fastest Way to Lose a War." Vexstar realized that Maya Collins had never been absent from her education. Her entire planet had been her classroom, and every human was a graduate student. In the art of warfare, the most dangerous student had finally decided to attend the Academy, and galactic military doctrine would never be the same. The galaxy had just discovered that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who looks completely harmless.